What are we listening to today?
The Immigrant Project by Girish and Astha.
Girish here from the Immigrant Project, Asta behind the camera. This is episode number 31, and we have Daniel Kingwell with us. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Daniel has been a lawyer for around 25 years, 25 plus years, and he has started his own firm, in fact, in 2024. Right, Daniel?
Yeah, beginning of 2024.
Can you tell us more about what you do?
Sure. So my name is Daniel Kingwell. I've been an immigration lawyer for since 2001, actually, almost 25 years, my whole career. I was an associate and then a partner at a litigation immigration firm. And since 2024, I've opened my own firm. We have now three lawyers, three registered consultants, and a great team.
Wow. So guys, Daniel and I, we were chatting offline, and while we have interviewed a lot of lawyers who manage usual cases of people immigrating to Canada, Daniel does something a bit different. I mean, he might do other cases as well, but his practice is slightly more niche. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Daniel, but you do a lot of misrepresentation cases.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. Yeah.
can you tell our audience what is it that you do?
Sure. So my career has really been very involved with litigation and enforcement. So whereas a lot of immigration lawyers focus on the application side, doing routine applications, I'm sort of the fire department. So I'll
Okay.
deal with appeals, I'll deal with enforcement, I deal with admissibility a lot, people who are out of status, as well as all other types of applications. But my career is really focused on taking people through the appeal process, through dealing with admissibility, discretion, humanitarian discretion, and also going to federal court.
So what kind of cases do you usually get
Mm.
on a day-to-day basis? What kind have you seen?
Yeah, well, day to day, just because of the work we've been doing, and whether it's from other lawyers or consultants, the community, I'll deal with cases where there's procedural fairness letter, where someone's been told there's some sort of a problem with their application. I'll deal with cases where people are trying to overcome a disability, whether it's criminal, medical.
Oh,
Misrepresentation is very common, right?
okay.
Maybe it's been refused, and I would have to do a reconsideration request, or I would have to take it to an appeal either at the Immigration Refugee Board or in federal court.
So since you manage this side of the immigration, have you ever had any case
Mhm.
where you had to decline the
Decline to
client?
take the
Yeah,
case?
yeah.
Well, so, I've got to make sure I maintain my license. And so it's very important to me, and also just as an ethical lawyer. And it's also best for clients too,
Mm,
that, always the best thing to do is to come clean. If there's a problem nowadays with information sharing, it's very common that the information is going to come out anyway. So what I'll do is I won't represent someone who wants to say something that they tell me is not true or that I know not to be true.
yeah,
I mean, I know it, almost as a fact, because it's not good for us, but it's also not good for them. Generally, people will get caught with misrepresentation. That being said, most people, I'm able to convince that it's actually better to come clean with whatever information they want to disclose. So it doesn't become a problem normally.
makes sense. Yeah,
Mhm.
makes sense. Since you have been a lawyer, Daniel, for 25 plus years,
Mhm.
and we were talking about this offline of how there have been changes in the system,
Mhm.
and how I mentioned that 20 years back Canada was considered to be an ideal destination to immigrate because this was a haven. You could come here, afford a good job, have a good house, but now things have changed. uh, a house that used to cost 1 million probably
Mhm.
10 15 years ago was considered to be a luxurious house,
Mhm.
but now you can't even get a two-bedroom condo for $1 million.
Yeah.
First of all, housing separate, I want to understand from you, in your 25 years of experience, where do you think, I mean, I'm sure the system was not a well-oiled machine, but it was an ideal system,
Mhm.
something to be envious about for other
Mhm.
countries.
Mhm.
Where do you think the Canadian immigration system went wrong?
Well, and there's a lot that's wrong with it, but as we're seeing in the States and in other countries, it's all relative,
Hmm.
right? So even with the problems that Canada has, we still do a lot of things well. Uh, the problem and the tension I've seen, if I can just put it very broadly, the what we were doing well for a long time was consistency. So,
Hmm.
Canada decided in the Immigration Act prior to the one that we have right now, decided to implement the point system, which became a model for many other countries, which was good because before we had a system that was just very discretionary,
Yeah.
right? And so there was a conscious decision to say, let's have a colorblind system. Let's have a system that values skills and experience, and we created the point system, and
Hmm.
that was great. The, it was great in that it created consistency. It was bad in that it created backlogs because we didn't. It
Okay.
wasn't flexible in terms of uh, prioritizing certain people. So it was first in, first out, and there were just gigantic backlogs. I think at some point we decided that the backlogs were bad, and both for the people that were applying and also for us, because what we were finding was that the people that we wanted were stuck in the queue at the back.
Yeah.
And so I think if I can say where we went wrong, because right now, as you know, I'm sure everyone knows, the problem right now is that there's a lack of predictability. People get into the system, they invest in the system. You go through you come in, you study, you get your postgraduate work permit. We all know the path.
Yeah.
And so the problem now is that we are suddenly saying, okay, we want to suddenly prioritize francophones, or we want to prioritize STEM, or we want to prioritize this type of occupation.
Exactly. Yeah.
And we also want to tighten up the numbers, and the points go up. And the next thing you know, there's a lack of predictability.
Yeah.
So we've gone from predictable and slow to unpredictable and fast. And I think at the end of the day, it's it's almost worse, because predictable and slow, at least you knew what you were getting into and you waited your turn and eventually you got there. I think where we went wrong was in trying to fix the problem and make it quicker and more to prioritize the people that we wanted. We made it so unpredictable that I think a lot of people are just saying, forget it. I don't want to put my life into a casino and invest all this time and energy only to find that there's nothing there. So I'd say that's where we went wrong, was getting away from the predictability, which people I think expect. And also the idea was we were going to pick people we wanted,
Yeah.
and that's great from a Canadian point of view, from purely self point of view. Okay, now we need construction workers. Now we need healthcare. Now we need this.
Yeah.
Um, you could argue even that's not great in a long-term planning sense. What you need today is not necessarily what you need
Exactly.
tomorrow. But so we went to a system that was suddenly prioritizing more about what we needed in the moment. So we decided we had a shortage of construction workers. Okay, let's give them status. Okay, now healthcare, let's give them status. Not only is that not necessarily great for long-term planning, but it creates so much uncertainty in the system that
Hmm.
I think people don't want to get into it. And at some point, the best and the brightest are going to go somewhere else, because there are many options nowadays, as we all
And people are going somewhere else, and the narrative is, and this
know.
is another flip side of the problem, is people are blaming immigrants for a lot of systematic issues that are cropping up in Canada, especially
Yeah.
housing, inflation, etc.
Mhm.
Do you think that's justified, or it was just the government's agenda to get in more people, and now immigrants are paying the price?
Yeah, well, don't get me started on that. I get really upset when and look, I'm an immigration lawyer and I have a lot of immigrant clients, so I guess I'm biased, but I also think I'm right in that immigrants are not the problem. I think housing and healthcare it's a homegrown problem.
Hmm.
I think it's from, years and years of poor planning. I'm not a housing and healthcare policy expert, but it's clear to me that um, the fact that students and immigrants are having trouble finding housing and healthcare is really more a symptom of the problem than the cause.
Hmm.
Uh, immigrants, because the birth rates are low, immigrants are essential to the growth. And whether we were going to have immigrants increasing the population or children, either way, the population is going to grow and it should grow. And we need a housing policy and a healthcare policy that can manage that. I think it's just very, very easy for us to blame other people for problems that we've caused. And so, no, I don't think that's the problem, but I think it's a very convenient group of people to blame. And unfortunately, now we're seeing the results.
That is unfortunate, Daniel.
Mm.
I want to talk about problems because the government came out with a statement. A lot of immigrant lawyers have spoken about this as well. Is there are so many lawyers in the system. There are so many consultants in the system who
Mm.
they only want good for the immigrants. They want good for the country,
Mm.
especially for economic immigration.
Mm.
But there are these certain rotten apples that have exploited the system. Have you faced any such challenges or these bad actors in the
Hmm.
system who do you think who you think are taking advantage of immigrants
Yeah, well,
and as well as exploiting the system?
yeah. So a big part of my practice is really cleanup, as I would say.
Hmm.
So people will hire, whether it's consultants or some lawyers who maybe don't have a lot of experience or who are unfortunately unscrupulous and encouraging people to file things and submit things that are not necessarily accurate, um, or just doing a poor job.
Hmm.
What happens is once an application has been done improperly, whether
Hmm.
it just wasn't filed properly or whether someone was encouraged to make up false information or provide false fraudulent documents, then what? Right? So they come to us for an appeal, and that's when we, have to deal with the results. Now,
Oh.
once the cases are damaged like that, it's quite a fight to get it recovered. So if someone's committed a misrepresentation, getting that issue resolved often requires a lot of work on appeals, and we do have a lot of success, but they are very difficult cases. And a lot of it comes down to people who were given the wrong advice. Don't reveal this information, hide this, don't say that. And more often than not, it comes back to haunt you. And it's like your mother said. It is kind of true in this process. Honesty is the best policy. My philosophy is live in the real world. If you've got a problem, if your facts don't quite fit what you're trying to do, present it, be upfront, and deal with it. Ask for discretion if you have to. Find a program. But the unscrupulous actors are unfortunately causing a huge problem, and I'm trying to clean it up as much as I can for my clients.
That's a really good job, Daniel. But I guess these people would continue to exploit the system.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be that. And I guess one of the frustrations I have, though, is the government recently, again, to come back to
Hmm.
sort of the theme right now that's kind of washing across Canada and the US and other countries to blame immigrants. I know there was the former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau came out and blamed the problems of students coming to Canada and having problems, blamed it entirely on unscrupulous actors. And I thought, okay, well, that's part of the problem. And by the way, government, you could have done a better job of policing that
Exactly.
and cleaning
Yeah.
it up,
Yeah.
right? Because immigrants, at the end of the day, are the ultimate victims of that, right?
It's because
Um,
of your policies these people are in the country.
yeah, but also I was a little upset to hear it because it was a way of the government not admitting that they were also responsible for this mess. So, I mean, they weren't specifically blaming unscrupulous consultants who were or lawyers who were um, telling people to lie. I think the suggestion was they were encouraging people to come to Canada and immigrate when they had no path. And I thought, well, okay, that's partly true.
Hmm.
But I think the real story is that the government laid out the path for people
Exactly.
and said, come to Canada. It was a great idea. Let's, study, spend your money here, put your roots down here. Spend your formative years here, get your PGWP, and then you'll stay, and that's great. And that was laid out for people, and then the door was slammed on their face. I call it the great bait and switch, right? That people, so many of the students came along, and they, like I said, it was very expensive fees, and they worked hard. And then at the end of the day, they changed the rules on them, really. I mean, they would say, we never promised you anything, but the clear idea was there'll be something for you at the end of this. And then the points went up, the draws became less frequent and more sporadic. So I guess, I mean, my answer to the unscrupulous
Yeah.
council that the government was blaming, I'd say, well, the government has a lot of responsibility for that too.
But I've also seen the government backtrack on a lot of their policies. They have reduced the immigration levels. And to that point, I've seen, first of all, Canadian Educational Institute, in my opinion, they exploit international students by charging them three, four, five times the fees
Mm,
which a local, whatever student would have to pay.
yeah.
At the same time, uh, in my opinion, I think an international student, for them, the market is so competitive,
Mm,
job market, that it becomes very difficult for them to find work after they graduate.
mm.
So yeah, my point is, of course, government is backtracking on a lot of their immigration levels, but have you seen a trend, where immigration levels, education, and job, they were all sustained,
Mm.
and now things are changing?
Um,
Because I see a lot of educational institute closing down. They're shutting shop. They're reducing the number of programs that they're
yeah,
offering.
yeah. Because look, I mean, the Canadian education system is good, But I mean, let's not kid ourselves. A lot of people were, not all the students were going to, the big universities, the U of T's and the McGills and the UBCs. I mean, there's a whole range of schools, right? And I think the whole idea was people were coming here and studying. Sure, you get an experience to be in Canada, but obviously the purpose was to stay,
Hmm.
right? And so if you have a situation that prioritizes that, eventually you're just going to have you're going to forget about the purpose of the education itself, and it's more just a means to an end. And I think that's just inevitable when the system gets out of control. And I think that's what happened. And honestly, I do feel bad for the students because, regardless of the quality of the education, they spent a lot of money for that. And, at the end of the day, they have nothing in a lot of cases. But yeah, definitely you could see, I'm no education policy expert, but it seemed to me obvious that there was a lot of educational institutions that were not necessarily providing a good education.
Speaking of these bad actors, Daniel,
Mm.
they have exploited a lot of these international students, especially people who want to come to this country, with the pretext of offering LMI,
Mhm.
especially for thousands of dollars.
Mhm.
And now I think government came up with a new rule this morning saying that LMI will not be added, points will not be added to your
Mhm.
CRS scores. Can you speak on that? Why government may have done this?
Yeah, well, I mean, we don't, nobody knows for sure. I think, but the issues, it's all big macro issues that I think are coming home to roost. One of them is that they have caps now.
Hmm.
Um, because of this pressure, this political pressure to reduce numbers, they impose caps. Well, when you impose caps, you have to make it more difficult to meet the requirements. And how do you do that? Well, one thing is to take away the opportunity of getting extra points for arranged employment. And but also, I mean, anecdotally, I can say that my understanding too was, well, obviously we know from reading that there was a lot of problem with fraudulent job
Yeah,
offers, right? And so, so if there's a problem with fraudulent job offers, if that's the problem, deal with the fraud,
yeah.
right? Don't say suddenly nobody gets any points for arranged employment, even if the arranged employment is real. So you would think that would be the answer, right? Well, I can just say from what I've heard, talking in the community, the answer to that was, my understanding is that the government really just felt like they couldn't police it. They just didn't have the ability to police it. And it
Hmm.
was essentially sort of throwing up their hands and saying, well, if there's a lot of fraud and we have no way of
They
policing
don't
it,
even have a lot of staff.
yeah, well, and they're
Hires,
cutting staff. You can't have a
hires.
good program if you're going to cut staff, right? Um, so, I mean, that's a whole other topic of conversation: the use of AI or misuse of AI to make up for lost staff. But I think, yeah, it's caps from political pressure and also fraud from a lack of policing. Consultants and some lawyers, leading to a lot of fraudulent job offers, and the inability to police the fraud meant, okay, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's just get rid of the whole any points for arranged employment, and that's also not really fair to people, especially people who have real arranged employment.
Daniel, if you were appointed as the Minister of Immigration
Mm-hmm.
and you were told to change one thing about the system,
Mm-hmm.
what is that one thing that you would pick?
Hmm. Now, it's easy for me to sit here and criticize the system. I don't have to
Just
be the
one.
minister. And I've watched the minister for 20 years deal with, crisis after crisis, and whether it's external or internal. So again, it's easy for
One
me.
improvement that you will bring into the system.
Um, I think uh, I would say predictability.
Hmm.
We're too much, distracted by the new shiny thing, right? And for a while, it was the opposite. It was, set it and forget it,
Yeah,
and it created some backlogs, and you can deal with that. But I think, I kind of long for the days of the predictability. Backlogs you can deal with,
yeah,
right? You can deal with, especially now that we got AI. If you use it properly, maybe
yeah.
that's an opportunity. But I would say if I could change one thing, it would be bring back predictability.
Okay.
And that's not just from a self-interested point of view, because, day to day, we don't know what the new rules are
Exactly. Yeah.
that are coming down the pipe.
It's
But
changing so quickly.
yeah, but it's not fair to the clients, like you need to plan your life.
Hmm.
And so it's not only not fair to them because, you know, you're living your life, you're thinking I'm going to immigrate to Canada, you start to come here, you're building a future based on a system that you're expecting to remain predictable, and then just they change it overnight. And you know what? It's not just as we were talking about before we started taping. It's not just bad for them, it's bad for us, it's bad for the brand. We are not
Mm,
going to attract the best and brightest to Canada if we're constantly changing the rules. The best and brightest are not going to waste years of their life in a casino. They're going to go somewhere else that offers them more predictability. And let's be honest, right? Like if your choice is all things being equal, Canada or somewhere, more, possibly more affluent, warmer, whatever, we don't have everything going for us. I mean, I like Canada. I'm glad, I'm proud to be Canadian. But let's be real. There's a lot of other places in the world, like
yeah.
the Gulf countries and other places. Maybe they don't offer permanent residence, but they do offer a good lifestyle, great opportunity,
No tax.
lower taxes, right? We're competing,
Yeah,
with the rest of the world for the best and brightest. So it's
exactly.
not just bad for them; it's bad for us.
Bad for
We
us as
keep
a
changing
country.
the rules on people, and they're not going to come here
Yeah, well, Daniel, if you ever end up running for office, I'll definitely vote for you.
anymore. No thanks. I would I would not wish that job on my worst enemy.
um, I have a separate question, and this question, you know, jumps between law and economics. So feel free to say no comments if you have no response to this. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but Canada as a country has heavily relied on people coming to this country as a source of income or as a source of its growth of GDP,
Mhm.
especially foreign students investing into the country.
Sure.
Now, with the whole situation with the US and we are backtracking on our policies,
Mhm.
do you still think Canada is an attractive country? And especially what we have spoken about that we are competing on a world stage.
Mhm.
Do you think we still stand as one of the most attractive countries in the world? And if yes, what message should we be sending out to the immigrants? Speak as you're speaking as a true Canadian.
Yeah, sure. Well, but look, as I believe that national pride means being, properly critical of what's going on. You want better,
Yeah,
right?
true.
And I mean, who knows what the tariffs are going to do to our economy? I still believe is that sanity will prevail, and
I
we'll
hope
get
so
back
too.
to business. We all do. I see this as an opportunity. The United States, sort of at least temporarily, kind of let's say losing their mind a little bit in terms of what they are and as a
Mm,
beacon for immigrants and this making things very difficult or inhospitable for immigrants, at least in their rhetoric. This is a tremendous opportunity for us in Canada. I mean, we've competed with the United States for the best and brightest, even the
yes.
ones that are there. And we've done this recently. There's been some outreach where, in the past few years, Canada said, okay, well, if for instance, tech workers, foreign tech workers come to
Come
Canada
to
if you
Canada,
don't,
yeah.
and this is a great
So
idea.
many have moved to Canada.
Yeah, and we should do more of that. Um, when the government announced their caps recently, and this was again, caving to political pressure.
Yeah.
Okay, fine, the students are to blame, the workers are to blame. We're going to cap everybody, visitors who are spending a lot of money here. It wasn't just us immigration lawyers,
Yeah.
bleeding heart immigration lawyers, who were saying this is a bad idea. The RBC, I think it was,
Hmm.
came out a few days later with announcements saying if you follow through with this government, our GDP is going to be cut in half. Our growth is going to be cut in
Oh,
half in the next year because they saw if you make it difficult for workers, students, visitors, everybody spends money here. It's really bad for us.
yeah.
So I think if we can get away from this, knee-jerk anti-immigrant sentiment that's,
Hmm.
coming to us, I think through almost by osmosis from the United States, um, and we really embrace the idea of being a place where immigrants can come and thrive. Um, not just make it easier for them to immigrate, but make it easier for them to use their skills and do what they do well. Doctors, engineers, everyone, tech people. If we can really just embrace that, I think it's a great opportunity for us, and I think it'll supercharge our economy. I think it'll give us a huge competitive advantage over the states. We just need to understand that that's in our interests.
Oh, that's a very fantastic response.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel politics aside, US is not doing any good favors to countries, other countries in the world. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everyone's upset
Yeah.
with US. I really hope common sense prevails.
Yeah, I hope so too. Also, what I will say is, the world kind of ebbs and flows in terms of tension and
Mm,
problems, and there's a global ups and downs in the economy. Canada tends to still be better off than other places in terms of economic opportunity, security, environment. We have a lot going for us. We just
mm,
need to lean into it
yeah,
and understand that immigrants, are a critical part of our growth and our future.
absolutely. With that note, Daniel, do you have any last comments for our audience, especially immigrants watching this episode?
Well, if you are an immigrant and you're frustrated with the system, or if you're a intending immigrant, if you're someone going through the system, I would say, stick with it. Uh, it's very important, and I'm not just saying this as an immigration lawyer. It's very important you get good advice, someone who can give you a roadmap and help you through it. Because I see too many cases where people are lost in the system, right, and then they start making mistakes. I often say, it's always worth speaking to someone who's knowledgeable, because even if there's no opportunity for you, it's good to hear that. It's good to know. Speak to someone who's got experience and can give you a roadmap, or who can tell you, you know what, there's nothing for you here right now. That's important to know too. And you can at least move forward in your life with the lights on, and with a path. So I would say stick with it. I think what we're going through right now is temporary, and I think
Yeah,
Canada will get back to being more hospitable to immigrants.
great. And if you are duped by one of your consultants, you should definitely reach out to Daniel. He does this for a living, of
Give me a
course.
call.
Yeah, and he gets what you get, how many, several calls in a day?
Well, we're getting a lot now just because of all the chaos, and even some from the States because
Oh,
everybody's
wow.
so nervous. But yeah, no, I mean, I'll get 5, 10 people contacting me a day to get, with questions. They're at the beginning, the middle, the end of the system. I'll get a person overseas who's looking to come here, and I just before I came here, there was someone else who has a meeting with CBSA at the airport for
Oh,
removal. So I see people all the way through, and at least we can give them the right advice on where they stand and what their options are.
I'm assuming your first consultation call is free or no?
Yeah, we
For,
do for the most part. I'm happy to speak to anybody. Give me a call, and I mean, even if it's a few minutes, see where we're going, and yeah,
how do we reach out to you?
you can email me at info@kingwelllaw.com. That's KINGWELLLAW.com. You can also Google Kingwell Immigration Law, and you'll find us online. And or you can call us at 416-988-8853.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show.
Thank you.